My name is Nathan Shaw, and at 48 years old, I had devoted 2 decades of my life to Beacon Construction, the region's leading residential builder in Ridgeview. Every morning before dawn's first light, I slipped into my leather-worn office chair in our modest brick headquarters, its walls lined with framed city commendations and photographs of completed homes. From the sun-baked streets of Maple Grove to the shaded avenues of Evergreen Falls, I had overseen every aspect of subcontractor compliance, verifying each electrician's license, enforcing every plumbing permit, and ensuring framers followed blueprints to the letter. My work wasn't paperwork alone. It was the invisible guarantee that the families moving into our houses would rest safely beneath solid roofs and behind code-approved walls. Then Oliver Reed arrived. The newly appointed vice president strode in behind my polished oak desk as if it had always been his, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than many of my crew earned in a month. His voice was crisp, rehearsed. "Nathan, we're charting a new course. Beacon needs fresh ideas, modern efficiencies." He never met my eyes as he spoke, eyes flicking to a glowing tablet instead. "Someone who can streamline approvals and reduce our bottom line." His meaning was clear. Corners would be cut under the guise of innovation, and the rigid standards I'd upheld for 20 years would be deemed outdated. That same afternoon, I watched a young man named Alec Foster introduced as my successor. At 34, he held an MBA and 0 field experience. Foster spoke of optimization and synergy, buzzwords that sounded hollow to seasoned ears. His soft hands had never gripped a hammer. His only blueprint was a slide deck. Yet Reed praised him like a protege, as if real-world expertise were secondary to corporate buzz. By day's end, I was boxing up my hard hats, safety vests, and decades of inspection reports. My first hard hat, a gift from my father, Henry Shaw, a union electrician who spent 37 years teaching me that every wire you approve has a family's life in it, sat atop a stack of documents I had curated since 2005. Photos of site walks with my daughter Sophie, now 15 and already fascinated by load-bearing walls, peered back at me from my desk. All those images, those memories of sunrises on foundation pours and late-night permit filings, were reduced to taped cardboard. On my way to the parking lot, I passed Crestmont Ridge, where 3 homes stood at different stages. Lot 12's foundation cured in the morning heat, Lot 9's framing rising against the sky, and Lot 6 awaiting its electrical rough-in. I had managed that project for 8 months, memorizing every contractor's schedule, every inspection deadline. Tomorrow, Foster would be in charge, certifying work he neither understood nor respected. I climbed into the battered leather seat of my silver Silverado and sat with the engine idling, watching twilight settle over the distant peaks. 20 years of measured routines, driving out at 5 a.m., walking every joist, double-checking every permit, felt meaningless now. I turned the key and drove home, a nagging dread twisting in my gut. After trade school, I joined Beacon as an assistant project manager and worked my way up to compliance supervisor. My father's lessons, his reverence for safe installations, guided every decision I made. In 2009, during a city inspection, I bumped into Emily Carter, the inspector who caught a subtle plumbing violation everyone else missed. We argued for 20 minutes until I sheepishly admitted she was right. 8 months later, we were married. Now she worked for the Ridgeview Building Authority, and Sophie often joined me on site visits, peppering contractors with smart questions that made me proud. When Reed first questioned why we insisted on multiple electrical bids, I explained that redundancy prevented disaster. He waved aside my concerns, his gaze turning to spreadsheets tracking cost per square foot, profit margins, and days to completion. Perhaps we're too rigid, he suggested. I defended my position fiercely once, replacing a licensed electrician whose work showed loose connections and improper grounding, only to see Reed jot down notes as if grading my performance. By June, every email I sent was CC'd to Foster. By August, Foster was asking follow-up questions that exposed his inexperience. Beacon's veteran project manager, Michael Evans, a man who remembered when a single safety violation could shut down an entire development, warned me, "Stay under the radar, Nathan. They're not looking for answers. They're looking for excuses." I had wished I listened more closely. 3 days after officially handing over my duties to Foster, my phone rang with an urgent call from Emily at the building authority. "Nathan, someone submitted a change order for Crestmont Ridge. Alvarez Electric out, Pacific Wire Solutions in. It lists you as the approving supervisor." My heart sank. I never signed that order. The signature looked like mine but wasn't. I sped to Ridgeview's municipal building, Emily at my side. On her screen, the paperwork showed a forged approval to swap a reputable contractor, Alvarez Electric, for Pacific Wire Solutions, whose license had been suspended 6 months earlier for permit violations and unsafe installations. The owner, Marcus Vane, lost his master electrician certification in 2021. I pressed Emily to run his license number, and her face turned grim as the database returned multiple flags. Armed with the change order and violation notice, I drove back toward Crestmont Ridge, picturing drywall concealing dangerous wiring, families blissfully unaware of the hazards hidden within their walls. Instead of returning home, I headed straight to the State Construction Licensing Board office, a nondescript government building I had only visited for continuing education seminars. With Emily's evidence in hand, I asked to meet a compliance investigator. Vanessa Cho, a no-nonsense inspector in her 50s, welcomed me into a small interview room. I explained how I had been replaced days ago, only to be implicated in authorizing unlicensed electrical work the next day. She examined the forged documents, ran license numbers through her records, and nodded thoughtfully. "So you say you were replaced 3 days ago, yet this approval is dated yesterday, bearing your signature." She clicked her pen. "This triggers a mandatory site inspection. If we find unlicensed work underway, the entire Crestmont Ridge project will be red-tagged and halted." I felt the weight of her words. Days of unfinished walls, halted construction, and frustrated families hanging in the balance. She leaned forward. "Any unauthorized installations must be removed, and proper contractors with valid credentials must redo the work. The duration depends on whether walls need reopening or if it's strictly paperwork." "There's something else," Vanessa said, her eyes meeting mine. "If this complaint leads to significant violations..." Nathan sat stiffly in the narrow office at the Ridgeview Licensing Board, the late morning sun slanting through high windows and casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Vanessa Cho, her steel-gray hair pulled into a tidy bun, her keen eyes behind narrow spectacles, pushed a thick manila folder toward him. The folder smelled faintly of toner and government-grade paper stock. "The state considers hiring the original supervisor as a consultant for the remediation," she said, her voice measured. "Someone who knows the project, understands the issues, can help bring everything back into compliance." She handed him a crisp complaint form stamped with the Beacon Construction letterhead. The heading read, "Official complaint against Beacon Construction for use of unlicensed contractors and fraudulent approval documentation." Nathan's fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the pen. He forced himself to steady his breathing, recalling the weight of every joist and every permit he'd overseen. With a single, deliberate sweep, he signed his real signature at the bottom. No forgery, no hesitation. "How long before the inspection?" he asked, folding the paper carefully. Vanessa tapped her pen against the folder. "Could be tomorrow morning, could be next week. We don't announce these things in advance." She offered him a thin envelope to seal the form and stepped back. "Thank you, Mr. Shaw." Outside, the midday heat pressed against the building's concrete walls like a living thing. Nathan walked to his truck, an aging silver Silverado dented from years of site visits, and climbed in. His mind raced. If Pacific Wire Solutions had started on Lot 6 without proper supervision, the electrical rough-in might already be half complete. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing naked wiring weaving through drywall cavities, unseen until it was too late. When he finally drove through the familiar streets to his home in Maple Grove, the neighborhood seemed curiously tranquil. The front yard of the Carter Shaw residence bloomed with bright azaleas, Emily's handiwork, framing the brick facade. Inside, Emily Carter was at the kitchen table, red grading pen in hand, surrounded by piles of student homework. Sophie, their daughter, sat nearby chopping carrots with earnest concentration. Volleyball practice stories tumbling from her lips. "How did it go?" Emily asked without looking up, her tone calm but her shoulders tense. Nathan set the folder on the table, sliding the sealed complaint form across to her. "Filed the official complaint. Mandatory inspection soon. They'll bring in state inspectors to red tag any unlicensed work." Emily paused mid-sentence, pen hovering over a calculus quiz. "Do you think they'll actually find violations?" He swallowed. Alec Foster didn't know the difference between a ground wire and a neutral. Oliver Reed doesn't care, so long as bids are low. I'd bet my career on it. They'll find everything. She met his gaze then, her eyes softening. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. "Found another position. Let them deal with the mess they made." Nathan shook his head. "I couldn't." Emily set down her pen and gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I know," she said, turning back to her grading. "Just remember, I'm proud of you." His phone buzzed with a text from Michael Evans, Beacon's veteran senior project manager. Heard Foster hired Pacific Wire for Lot 6. "You know anything?" Nathan typed back, looking into it. Then he powered down the screen and sank into the kitchen chair. Word was already spreading among other project leads. The new compliance supervisor was making questionable calls. That night, Nathan lay awake, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, wondering which contractors on lots 9 and 12 might also be unlicensed. He drifted into a restless sleep, only to be startled awake by his alarm at 5:30 a.m. 2 days later, a crisp text from Vanessa Cho arrived at 6:30 a.m. "Curtis, we need you at the Crestmont Ridge site in 1 hour. Bring your documentation." Nathan dressed in the dark, sturdy boots, faded jeans, a Beacon construction safety vest, and stuffed his folder into the back pocket of his jeans. The pre-dawn sky was a pale wash of lavender as he steered his truck along the desert highway, the outlines of cacti and mesquite jutting against the horizon. In the distance, the partially built houses of Crestmont Ridge stood in a row like silent sentinels awaiting judgment. By 7:30 a.m., 3 state vehicles huddled at separate lots, inspectors milling with clipboards and cameras. At the site trailer, Vanessa Cho greeted him, her expression grave. Across from her sat Alec Foster, shoulders slumped, fidgeting with a stack of papers. "Mr. Shaw," Vanessa said, gesturing to Foster, "we need you to verify some information. Records show you approved Pacific Wire Solutions for electrical work on lots 6, 9, and 12. A cold knot formed in Nathan's stomach. "I never approved them for anything," he said. "I didn't even hear of Pacific Wire until after I was removed." Vanessa passed him 3 sets of approval forms. Each bore a signature almost identical to his, stamped with dates spanning 2 weeks, and the latest dated after he'd been replaced. Inspector Delgado, a broad-shouldered man with 2 decades of site inspection experience etched into his lined face, spoke up. We found active electrical work on all 3 lots. No permits pulled, no licensed supervision. Foster stammered, pulling a photocopy of an electrical license from his folder. I was told this contractor was fully licensed. He handed them the paper. Delgado examined the photocopy. License number matches Marcus Vane, he said, but someone altered the expiration date from 2021 to 2024 in ink, then made copies. He looked sharply at Foster. Where did you get this? Foster's face went pale. Marcus, gave it to me when I hired him. Said there was a database delay on license renewals. Nathan felt a flicker of sympathy before it hardened again at the thought of families moving into those unsafe homes. Delgado handed him a hard hat. Walk through these houses with us and point out what you see. Lot 6 was a tangled mess. Electrical boxes mounted crookedly, mismatched wire gauges, dangling junction splices wrapped in ordinary tape. At Lot 9, the main service panel was a disaster. Overloaded circuits, missing ground bars, and exposed live connections. Lot 12 wasn't complete, but showed the same pattern. Sloppy cuts, loose fittings, hazardous shortcuts. Nathan's heart pounded as he cataloged each violation. How long to bring this into compliance? He asked Delgado. Best case, 6 weeks if we can find skilled electricians. Worst case, tear down to the studs and start over. Vanessa scribbled notes. 3 houses red-tagged, work stopped. Pacific Wire Solutions referred to the State Attorney General for unlicensed contracting and document fraud. Foster was suspended from approving any electrical work, pending full investigation. Later that afternoon, Nathan walked back into the Beacon construction office. Word of the inspection had spread like wildfire. Through the closed door of Oliver Reed's office, he heard Reed's raised voice, probably defending his protege to corporate brass. Michael Evans greeted Nathan at the reception desk, a triumphant grin splitting his weathered face. You beautiful bastard, Evans said quietly. How'd you know? Nathan shrugged, keeping his tone neutral. He made it too easy. Evans's eyes gleamed. State investigators will want your input. They'll send word if they need more. An hour later, Vanessa called. The state was forming a remediation team to assess the full scope of Crestmont Ridge's violations and determine the work needed to bring everything back up to code. They want an experienced compliance supervisor as a consultant, she said. Pay is $300 a day plus expenses, probably 6 to 8 weeks of work. Nathan did the math. $18,000 minimum to last through Christmas, more than he'd earn in 3 months under Reed's regime. Better yet, he'd work alongside state inspectors instead of business school graduates who treated safety as optional. When do I start? He asked. Monday at 7 a.m., Vanessa replied. Report to the site trailer. That evening, Emily and Sophie sat around the kitchen table again, homework and dinner prep in familiar disarray. Nathan announced his new consulting role. Emily's eyes widened with relief. Sophie beamed. Does this mean the people who replaced you screwed up? Sophie asked, poking at her peppers. Nathan laughed softly. They did. Pretty badly. Sophie grinned. Good. Emily shot him a playful glare. Mind your language. The phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Curtis, this is Marcus Vane. Need to talk about the inspection. Meet? Nathan showed Emily. She frowned. Don't meet with him. Forward everything to Vanessa. Natalie snapped a photo of the message and sent it to Vanessa with a warning. Unlicensed contractor contacting me directly. Vanessa's reply pinged almost instantly. Do not engage. Possible witness tampering. Screenshot and forward any further messages. Nathan leaned back, letting the weight of the day settle around him. Marcus Vane might be scrambling, but Oliver Reed had created the conditions that made the fraud possible in the first place. Both of them would learn that cutting corners in construction carries consequences that no business theory can smooth over. Monday morning, Nathan would return to Crestmont Ridge, this time as a state consultant rather than a beacon supervisor. Sometimes, he thought, the system actually worked. Nathan stood at the head of the long conference table, the same worn leather chair he'd once occupied as Beacon Construction's compliance supervisor, now cradling him as a consulting witness. The room felt colder than usual. Its steel and glass-board decor emphasized the gravity of the moment. At the far end, Oliver Reed sat motionless, his perfectly tailored navy suit at odds with the tension rippling through the table. Around him were the company's top brass, executives flown in from Aurora, attorneys in bespoke charcoal suits, and a pair of insurance analysts hunched over sleek laptops, their screens aflame with spreadsheets. For 3 weeks, state investigators had combed through Crestmont Ridge's half-finished homes. Now, Vanessa Cho rose to deliver the final report. With a calm authority born of 25 years in the State Compliance Division, she opened a crisp binder labeled Findings, Beacon Construction, Crestmont Ridge. Her glasses caught the fluorescent light as she looked down at her notes. "Gentlemen," Vanessa began, her voice resonant, "our investigation confirms 3 residential structures with significant electrical violations, 14 distinct code infractions, multiple instances of forged approval documentation, and 2 full weeks of unlicensed work proceeding without any oversight. Our cost assessment estimates a minimum of $430,000 to remediate the deficiencies and restore code compliance." She paused, letting the gravity settle. The insurance representative, a lean man named Marcus Linden, leaned forward, tapping keys. Numbers flickered across his screen, calculating liability, remediation costs, plus legal expenses, plus potential homeowner lawsuits, plus the hit to Beacon Construction's bonding capacity. Each figure drove home the magnitude of the oversight. At the far end, Oliver Reed's face had gone pale. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Across from him, the chair that had once held Nathan's empty vest was now a stark reminder of what had gone wrong. Alec Foster, the insecure supervisor who'd supplanted Nathan, was conspicuously absent. He'd been terminated as soon as HR discovered he'd falsified his resume, claiming years of field experience he'd never possessed. The corporate counsel, Joanna Whitfield, cleared her throat. "How did we arrive at this point?" she asked, gaze sweeping the table. Vanessa opened a file stamped Nathan Shaw Compliance Record and slid it toward the attorneys. Mr. Shaw maintained a flawless record for 2 decades, 0 violations, commendations from multiple municipal inspectors, and an unbroken string of safety audits. He was replaced by Mr. Foster, whose lack of industry experience led to reliance on unchecked documents and a disturbing disregard for permit verification. Reed attempted to interject. "We were merely rolling out new efficiency protocols." Vanessa held up a hand, silencing him with the authority of her office. Cutting corners under the guise of efficiency resulted in electrical systems installed by an unlicensed contractor whose license was suspended 18 months ago. Those shortcuts could have resulted in fires, electrocutions, or worse. She met Reed's gaze evenly before continuing. When safety corners are cut, people die. 3 families almost moved into deadly homes. An assistant passed around a color-printed chart. The first column listing violations: improper grounding, overloaded circuits, unprotected junctions, missing permits, each matched with a photograph extracted from site inspections. The images were damning: wires snaking behind drywall, service panels wired incorrectly, junction boxes stuffed with mismatched cables. The insurance analysts murmured among themselves, adjusting their calculations. Reed's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrests. Now, Vanessa delivered the final recommendation. Beacon Construction must rehire Nathan Shaw as compliance supervisor for all remaining phases of Crestmont Ridge. Only his expertise and the trust of the state inspectors could rescue this project. The recommendation was unanimous. All eyes turned to Nathan. He felt a swirl of vindication tempered by the weight of responsibility. 3 weeks prior, Reed had dismissed him as too rigid. Now, the state mandated that his rigid adherence to code was the only path forward. Joanna Whitfield cleared her throat again. "Mr. Shaw, would you be willing to return in a consulting capacity, reporting directly to the State Compliance Division?" Nathan inhaled, glancing at Vanessa's expectant face. "Yes," he replied steadily, "as a consultant with authority to halt work that doesn't meet code." Across the table, Reed's mouth twisted, powerless to object. 6 months later, Nathan sipped black coffee in his bright new office at Beacon Construction's Ridgeview headquarters. The title on his door read, Regional Compliance Director. 3 development sites now fell under his oversight, and each contractor's license was verified. Every approval bore his genuine signature, and every job site followed the safety protocols he'd always championed. A firm knock announced Michael Evans, Beacon's longtime senior project manager and Nathan's staunchest ally. Evans strode in, his face crinkling into a triumphant grin. "Heard from Vanessa today," Evans said, settling into the chair opposite Nathan. "Marcus Vane is pleading guilty to contractor fraud. 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and banned from ever holding an electrician's license again." Nathan nodded, closing his laptop. "And what about Foster?" Evans's grin faded into a smirk. "He landed a gig in insurance sales in Tucson. Funny thing, his resume makes no mention of the 2 weeks he spent supervising electrical work." Nathan allowed himself a small laugh. Reed, too, had lasted only another month. Corporate realized that efficiency experts who generate $400,000 disasters aren't exactly cost-effective. He paused, recalling the turmoil of the past months, the anxious families waiting for safe homes, the state inspectors' stern gazes, the humiliating boardroom hearings. The salary bump and permanent title were welcome, but the true reward lay in knowing that every house under his watch would be safe. That afternoon, Emily Carter and Sophie joined Nathan on a tour of his new office. Emily's kind eyes surveyed the framed compliance certificates hanging on the wall, while Sophie peered out the window toward Crestmont Ridge, her volleyball backpack slung casually over one shoulder. "Dad, my engineering professor says people who do things right the first time never make headlines," Sophie said, crossing her arms. "But people who fix other people's mistakes get promoted." Nathan laughed, tousling her hair. "Smart professor." He turned to Emily, whose proud smile warmed him. She also said, "Revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation and regulatory compliance." "I'll drink to that," Emily teased, raising an imaginary glass. That evening, Nathan drove home along the familiar stretch of road overlooking Crestmont Ridge. The houses stood complete now. Families had moved in weeks ago, blissfully unaware of the calamity that had nearly befallen them. But now, every circuit had been tested, every connection inspected, every permit logged and archived. The softly glowing porch lights marked the quiet triumph of diligence over shortcuts. As he passed, he noted the front yard of Lot 6, where an overturned pumpkin lay on the lawn, proof that Halloween had arrived without electrical mishaps. The ridge's silhouette against the dusky sky reminded him that doing things right sometimes takes longer, costs more, and invites skepticism. But in the end, it always pays off. Nathan pulled into his driveway and watched the house light up as Emily and Sophie appeared at the window, waving. He shut off the engine, taking a deep breath of the cool desert air. Safety, integrity, and code compliance. They had been more than bureaucratic checkboxes. They had been the difference between safe homes and lethal hazards. He locked the truck and headed inside, ready to leave the day's battles behind him.